Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Gameweek 18 transfer plans. We are, of course, in an extremely busy period, so the content is going to go really quickly, potentially without full information, but I'm just going to try and anticipate what is going to go on Sunday for the purpose of this video. And on top of that, I'm also going to be talking about, more specifically, I think the SAKA situation, how I plan to deal with it as a manager, and yeah, just the state of my team, first of all, starting from Gameweek 17, which is clearly currently ongoing. Right now with Gameweek 17, I've got a couple of blanks from Brentford. Pretty poor result. Their first home defeat where they didn't score. And I think potentially even their first home defeat. So a really poor result from them. But when you actually look at the expected goals and some of the chances, I think it feels like unfortunate, I would say, that they lost like thoroughly 0-2. I don't have too many regrets in keeping Mbumo. I would have loved to know, of course, that he was going to blank in advance or something like that, but that's silly. Yeah, I mean, it seemed logical to hold him. And one of the transfer options that I was really looking at was, you know, the likes of, let's say, an Eze or a Jota. And I still think that Jota's minutes are going to be a bit suspect. I think that Darwin as well has played really well, so that it doesn't seem likely that a Gameweek 18 transfer is on the cards. Now, more significantly, the biggest thing coming out of this game week, before Palmer, Salah, and even Cunha, we'll talk about that later, has played, is that SAKA injury, that hamstring injury, or what seemed like a hamstring injury. So the news that we have right now is that Arteta has already mentioned, one, that he's worried. Two, we've seen a video of SAKA leaving the grounds on crutches. Now, I think crutches doesn't really intonate how significant the injury is. I remember last season there was a very specific game week where Ederson was on crutches and somehow still started in 3 to 4 days time when we were sort of in that double game week part of the season. So, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, but I think most people watching the game could see that it looked really bad for SAKA, and it did look like a hamstring injury, which typically is at least 2+ weeks out, and the way it seemed like it hurt him, you know, I don't want to be an armchair physio. It could seem like it could be a month out, and we already know, if you look at, for example, the fixture period. I mean, we're here with Gameweek 17, Gameweek 18 is on the 26th, Gameweek 19 is on the 29th. So realistically, SAKA could already just miss 3 game weeks, which is very crucial because those are all really good, bright Arsenal games. So if you look at the Arsenal fixtures, it's missing Ipswich at home. It's missing Brentford away, which, let's be honest, I don't know what happened to the FDR changes, but Brentford is a team you want to target on defense, absolutely, and that will remain the case for the season. All the models we've looked at, all the kind of expected data that we've been looking at suggests that I'm not going to change my mind on Brentford. On the 20th, of course, you have Brighton away, and Brighton also have arguably looked a little bit poor so far, not to mention that, crucially, it's still a fixture where Liverpool are versus Man United, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But that's interesting because most of the likely SAKA replacements at that sort of price point are going to be Son, Bruno, and actually Odegaard. Odegaard has been extremely flat in open play, but now we know he's going to be on penalties, and who knows if he's going to, like, the team is going to have to try and move away from SAKA in a sense and try to redistribute the attacking dividends. Whether that's just, you know, more share to Martinelli, Havertz, Jesus, that's possible. But Odegaard is just naturally just going to be a better pick now because he's going to get pen share as long as we know Saka's out for a while. And even if Saka's out for 2-3 weeks, that's very significant because that's a lot of game weeks in this sort of short run and time span. So I do really think that Odegaard is firmly a pick. Bruno feels like more of a long-term pick because the fixtures are a bit mediocre, but it's also hard to say that there's any midfielders who are interesting. And then when it comes to Son, well, you know, you're going to miss out on that Liverpool game, which is great. You miss out on a tough fixture, but Nottingham Forest is still a tough game. After that, though, he's actually got really good fixtures like Wolves at home and even like a Newcastle fixture. So I actually quite like Son's games, but the question with Son, as we've seen this season, is going to be on minutes. And as you guys know, if you've been following my content, SAKA to Son has been unkind to me so far, if we put it lightly. We've just had 4 blanks in a row from SAKA. So that's that. As far as the rest of the team, look, I didn't play Rodgers. Yes, Man City are poor. That's why I actually went for a move, which was Dunk to Castagna. Ironically, Dunk did get an assist. A pretty jammy one, I'd say, but he played well in the match, so no complaints. And slightly better, I guess, look from Brighton on defense, but still conceding upwards of 1 XG to West Ham, which is, I'd say, still pretty unimpressive. As far as Guardiola and Lewis, you know, looked really poor compared to Aston Villa, but I have to actually give Aston Villa a lot of credits for that performance. I thought this kind of pivot of Onana and Kamara looks amazing. Tillemans at the 10 looks amazing. And Rodgers had just a wonderful game. I think everyone within the midfield, including McGinn, was pinging perfect passes. They controlled the tempo a lot within different stages of the game versus City, specifically within the second half. And Pep mentioned that. If you listen to his post-match presser, he talks about how, ironically, with Walker coming on, how they kind of struggled as a team to meet the intensity of the match and to kind of adapt. So that's that for Man City. But Ake was on the bench. Stones got re-injured, and I suppose with Ake coming back, you have a potential for Guardiola to play left back. Right now, he's sort of playing still a left center back position. Lewis did play today, but that was mostly Lewis and Kovacic in the pivot, and then, Gundo and KDB in the 10s, and then a 3 at the back system, which I still don't think benefits Guardiola, but Guardiola still had one of the best chances within the match with the Grealish cross coming from him sort of carrying the ball in transition. So Guardiola looks great. I'm really happy to still own Guardiola for the next 3 fixtures. As bad as Man City defense looks, yes, that's true. I think the fixtures are there, right? If Brentford, for example, their only clean sheet this season was versus Everton. Everton have the least expected goals accumulated so far as a team. So, these are still fixtures that we want to target. Everton, Leicester specifically. West Ham probably going to be a clean sheet loss, but I'll take that. As far as Cunha, I'm just going to have to put my hands up and say, I wish that he was suspended tomorrow. It's so unlikely that I'll get Rodgers off the bench, but no complaints. I think some people could have maybe made the very justifiable move of playing Rodgers over João Pedro. I don't think it was ever really between Cunha and João Pedro and Rodgers, sorry, for me. Definitely between João Pedro and him. But I do like my penalty takers. João Pedro played a lot of minutes, and ultimately this is still Rodgers' best haul in FPL history, right? So it's not like it was a super obvious play, and I'm just going to take it on the chin, and that happens. I'm actually happy that I own Rodgers. I thought he looked exceptional, and I thought Aston Villa looked the best that they've looked this season, specifically with that sort of pivot that I mentioned, and the dynamics with now Tielemans and Rodgers within more advanced positions and sort of supporting each other. So that's that. Looking forward to Castagna as well. Really good home fixture, and hopefully the whatever goes on with the captaincy between Salah and Palmer works out. And Isak has been fantastic. That move 2-3 game weeks ago where I went from Solanke to Isak has really helped me out. And as I keep on saying it comes back from all these kind of incremental moves where I was trying to farm price rises through, things like going for Hall over Colwell, going for João Pedro over Wood, which maybe lose a goal versus Ipswich, but that's fine. You just move on in FPL and enjoy how things kind of unravel completely differently to how you have it. So if I show my team for next week, the key here is that, first of all, Flecken has a terrible game. I don't think it's a terrible game for Mbumo because I still think Brighton defense have looked pretty poor. It's quite easy for me to play Guardiola, quite easy for me to play Lewis, Rico Lewis that is, and then actually put Hall second bench, I would say. So that's kind of the plan, generally speaking. I think Aston Villa have looked really impressive, so I don't really mind benching Rodgers again. I'll have to probably take it on the chin. I just think João Pedro, Brentford at home is an even better fixture, an even bigger gulf. Newcastle away is going to be much tougher for Rodgers. So when you look at the team, it's actually about Cunha, right? I have Flecken that's bad, Saka that's bad, and Cunha that's bad. And I think that is where we can segue right into my transfer plans, where I'll be using the Fantasy Football Hub, my team pick and rating tool. So let's have a look. Okay, so we're now here with the tool that I talked about from Fantasy Football Hub. Keep in mind, in this Christmas period, you actually have a great deal in place, which is a free trial for 30 days. Anytime you sign up using the link in bio below, you can get access to a wonderful array of tools that can actually help get you, access to advanced data. And honestly, a lot of support decision-making tools with suggested AI transfers, wildcards, even chip strategies, and even Ben Crellin's legendary fixture planner. So have a look at that. Use it, I would say. Maximize the free trial. If you don't want to continue, you can cancel it. But it's a great tool, and I think it's fantastic to actually help get those green arrows. So anyways, moving on towards Gameweek 18. This is the My Team pick and rating tool, as I said. The team looks great, right? Once again, it looks great. And that's simply because I think City defense versus Everton is just a good game. The key players that I'm missing out are clearly going to be on Trent. Saka's not really viable. Cunha's not really viable. And I don't think the AI is really recognizing that. Flecken is also not very viable. So this is where I have to say I've got 2 free transfers ultimately. And 2 free transfers probably suggests that I have a couple options. And I think the easiest thing to do is any 2 out of 3 options that I want to try and tackle the issues that I have. I think Rodgers is arguably someone that I'm okay to play over, let's say, I don't really mind that. I'll probably play him over Cunha, expecting that Cunha is sort of not playable. If I want to go out of Flecken and Saka, I think what I'm actually planning to do now is actually going for Odegaard. And I'll speak about Odegaard quickly. First of all, the model probably thinks Odegaard is slightly worse than Bruno. And I think that all it needs to do is sort of recognize that Odegaard's on penalties while Saka's out. And that's a huge sort of boost to the expected value of Odegaard as a pick for the next 3 to 4 game weeks or however long Saka's out for. So for me, that's an extremely powerful signal. Odegaard's ownership is also extremely low, so I kind of like the idea of going for Odegaard. If I go for Odegaard and I actually keep, Cunha, for example, on the bench, what I'm planning to do is actually just go out of Flecken through Alisson Becker. And that's going to make the team a lot stronger. and I'll play Rodgers or Hull, and I'll probably make a decision there. I don't think it's too tough. I just kind of have to buy into whether I'm high into this Aston Villa team or Newcastle at home, of course, and whatever the vibes might be. But I think Guardiola and Lewis are pretty much nailed to play. I think they're very likely to play, so I'm not too worried about my defense. Worst case, I just play Hull for Lewis, which I think is a bit subpar compared to the competing defenses that I'm up against for this game week, but it's something that I'll manage with. And that's sort of the Odegaard plan here. Another plan that I've thought about is if I don't go for, let's say, Odegaard, I could be going for Bruno, but I think that Bruno is quite a tame transfer. I'm pretty confident that Odegaard has a lot of upside in the next 3 matches versus Bruno. I mean, even if I was to bring up Bruno to the table, Bruno, for example, has Wolves away, Newcastle home, Liverpool at away. So the nice fixture clearly is Wolves and Newcastle. Liverpool, a god-awful fixture, I would say, whereas Odegaard has one slightly tough fixture, which is Brighton away, which is nowhere near, I guess, the level of a Liverpool away fixture. And keep in mind, Ipswich at home. These kind of things are just going to be amplified when you have Odegaard having pen share. And I think that's very, very significant for such a good attacking team like Arsenal. So those are my thoughts. And going for Flecken is also a lot of upside compared to Flecken, who has a pretty tough game, whereas I've got Leicester at home. And I'm still planning to, for example, play João Pedro against Flecken. So one of those game weeks where finally I can get rid of Flecken and not feel like I've got an attacker going against him, which I think is nice. So that's sort of the plan that I have here. The alternative plan is if I, let's say, relaunch the pick and team rating tool, one thing that I could do actually instead is go out of SAKA, go into Odegaard, and also go out of Cunha and go into, for example, either a Solanke or a Jackson. Or even I could flip things around and actually go with Jesus. Solanke is interesting for me just because I think he's actually racked up really, really respectable XG this season. I know people will say that Solanke has been pretty timid. He's been worse than Jackson. And yes, in terms of outcomes, that's been absolutely the case. But in terms of expected goals, Solanke's done extremely well so far. And you can see within even tough matches in the season that he's had great returns. Like even the cup match versus United, the Aston Villa game, for example, Solanke is just a very consistent pick. And I still think he's a very strong pick. It's the only fixture that's tough here. That's going to be the Nottingham Forest one and then the Arsenal one. So it's not a perfect line of fixtures. And it feels a lot more, I think, clunky, to say that I would go for Solanke here, because I actually think that going for Alisson could be a little bit better in terms of gaming the fixtures, because Nottingham Forest have been such a good defense that I don't really like the idea of going for Solanke now. I think instead, I prefer the Alisson plan where I can go for Solanke the week after that too. But the alternative is I could also just go for a Bruno, right? Going for a Bruno means that I can go for Jesus. And what's nice about going for Jesus in this situation, and Jesus clearly doesn't have sort of expected numbers updated, but going for a Jesus here might even mean that I can go for Son. So it's either Son or Bruno. We talked about Son and Bruno already. Bruno is a bit more of a long-term pick. I think Son, you can say he's probably not worth his price point, but he's clearly been delivering really well. His baselines this season have been really good. The question, and what has only really been the issue with Son this season, is just the minutes, right? Can you be dealt with a 29-minute surprise start or benching? So that's kind of the issue with Son. Those 45-minute substitutions just to manage his fitness because of his age, I think are really relevant. But Son and Jesus is nice because it critically gives me that 0.9 within this game that I really need for my team in FPL, because that 0.9 is the upgrade that I need to go from Guardiola to Trent. It's also the same upgrade that I need to go from Flecken to Alisson. So Son and Jesus is absolutely stretching the limit for myself, but it's definitely a move that I can do. But I think it is almost exceeding the limit. I still quite like Odegaard, to be honest, given the sort of benefits of things like pen share. But Jesus also playing in the center forward position, I think is very, very significant if we can get that. However, with SAKA being out, I think it's debatable what positions he can fill up. I think it could be, you could see sort of different variations of things going forwards. And so Jesus is interesting me, so is Odegaard. And then it's really a question of, do I prefer Odegaard and therefore want to spend money in different positions? And am I comfortable with Solanke, for example? Or do I go for a little bit more of a short-term pick, like, for example, a Jesus or an Odegaard? Because if I go for someone like Jesus, it might be the case that in the future I need to pre-book a transfer for him. And it might be later down the line that I go for someone like Wood or Evan Nilsson and deal with someone within a cheaper price range, and that's fine. Or I'm in a sort of Odegaard path and I can actually still spend a little bit of money. Because if I, for example, go for Odegaard once again, which is my, I think, preferred path for now, if I go for, like, let's say Alisson, kind of make those transfers, optimize the team, go into game week, let's say 19 here, assuming that Cunha is going to be suspended, I just go for Solanke in this situation because I can't afford Jackson. And I still think that this is a very strong team. The reason being because Liverpool's best game is actually that game on Gameweek 18. The fixtures like West Ham away are quite good, but then I also think in terms of the attacking ceiling of things, like I don't really need to necessarily go out of the likes of a Guardiola to a Trent immediately, especially if I have Alisson. So having 0.7 in the bank is quite nice in this sort of landscape here by going Odegaard, Solanke, and Alisson Becker. That gives me enough money to sort of make, moves on, let's say, budget midfielders potentially, or anyone else at different price points. And later down the line, what I can simply do is just maybe make a move out of Mbumo. So that's very plausible. So if I optimize the team here for Game Week 19, assuming that I went for Solanke on this game week, I benched João Pedro in this situation, I go to Game Week 20 here where I would actually have a transfer once again. And it might be the case that on Game Week 20, I just keep the team as it is, because we talked about how, look, on Game Week 21, it's actually a nice time to maybe switch back into a Bruno, but Bruno actually has Liverpool in this fixture, and then Mbumo has a really good fixture anyways on Game Week 20, and who knows, Man City away could still look like an amazing fixture, so I'm not necessarily sure whether I would need to move out of Mbumo up until basically that Liverpool fixture, if I'm quite honest with you. So the plan right now is to go to Game Week 21 with 2 free transfers. Probably the move here is just to go into Bruno, Southampton at home, which I think makes a lot of sense. And that is going to give me 0.6 in the bank. And this is where I can start to consider if I want to move into, let's say, someone like a Sarr, for example, who's got Leicester away, or even move into some of the other picks, like, for example, an Amad Diallo, right? And Amad Diallo will give me all the money that I really need from Mbumo later down the line, and that could be plausible. Now, if Eze is somehow miraculously alive, we could also consider him then. But I actually really like Sarr now, and I really like Amad as transfer replacements for Mbumo later down the line, if I'm not going to make the transfer on this week, and I don't need to, because clearly SAKA is a more priority transfer. So right now, those budget midfielder transfers that I sort of penciled in last week have been shoved all the way down to Game Week 21, and I think that's totally fine, because you're kind of dealing with a repeat scenario, which is, once again, a big swing, I suppose, for poorer Mbumo fixtures, and a good time to sort of move out of him. So in theory, I could go to Sarr here, make this move, and it's not a great fixture for my defense right now. Clearly, I can just play Hall, which I think makes it look a lot better. And then in Game Week 22, I'll probably play Guardiola. I'll probably roll again. I think this is actually a really solid looking team. And then on Game Week 23, I bring Trent back into the team with no issues, which I think is something that I'm sort of planning to do. And that sort of excess money in the bank, will have to decide, what I'm going to do to play around with it. But the fixtures are still, I think, really, really nice around here. So I don't really mind this too much. And that's kind of the rough plans that I have going for this. On top of that, we know that we could be moving back into some Everton players in Game Week 24. I'm also not planning to use the assistant manager chip as well. So that's something that I'd like to flag too. I don't really know that Game Week 24 is going to be great for, the assistant manager chip. Castagna here can be shoved out completely to, let's say, someone like Mikalenko. And that could be how I really approach the double, really. It could even be the case that I move out of, let's say, Lewis around here, because I think this is around the time where I'm happy to sort of bin Lewis off and maybe actually just play someone like a Tarkowski instead. And that could actually allow me to bench Gabriel in the double, which, look, it looks like it's nonsense now, but we know that there's clearly double game week fixtures here, so it would make sense for me to play these players and enjoy the double for what it is. So maybe even, for example, bench a João Pedro in this situation, or play a Hall instead, where I think the fixture actually looks better, or specifically Morgan Rogers versus a really weak Wolves. So that's something I could do. But that's the general plan. I think it all stems back down to Game Week 18, as I was trying to say, where right now I've got 3 problem childs within my team: Cunha, Saka, and Flecken. And I think that the targets that I generally like for all of these players is Jesus and Solanke, because I think Jackson makes it very tight in terms of the budgeting. Personally, I also think that Jackson still has that suspension risk. And one of my concerns with Jackson, if we look at the Palmer fixtures, is we saw Jackson get rotated for that Southampton game. Is it not possible at all where if you get Jackson playing versus Everton and then you get Jackson playing versus Fulham, is it not possible that Jackson could get rotated for Ipswich? I think that's very plausible. And I think you could get Jackson rotated there, which is not nice. And then, first of all, he could get suspended anyways on 18, 19, and 17. And on Game Week 20, he might come back. And that's my only concern, right? If he misses that Ipswich fixture, he's just not close to me for Solanke as a pick to go for from this sort of juncture, even though Solanke has one of those Liverpool fixtures within the distance. Or sorry, not Liverpool fixtures, but one of those Arsenal away fixtures within the distance, which is very, very tough, of course. And I recognize that. So let me know what you think. Do you guys like a Jesus or a Solanke? I think Jesus is nice because as long as Saka's out, I think his ability to stay within the team is there. And let's be honest, Arsenal have been struggling for goals in open play, and he has somehow unlocked them as a team, which is really impressive. Going back to the midfield point, I think we've got lots of options. Son, for me, is a little bit of a stretch. I'm more keen on a Bruno or Odegaard. I know we want to look at Jota as well, and Jota is a very interesting pick that a lot of people will point out too, but I just really think that coming back from injury, it's so unlikely with Darwin actually playing remotely well and Luis Diaz also being comfortable playing that center forward position at times, that you're going to get Jota with sufficient enough minutes with the tight turnaround of games to kind of start 3 or 2 game weeks in a row. So I don't really like Jota, to be honest. I prefer Odegaard for the pen share, for the minutes, and that's kind of my thoughts right now. Odegaard, Solanke, and Alisson within the distance. Revisit Trent on Gameweek 23 when they've got Ipswich at home, Liverpool that is, and ride it out with the Man City defense that looks awful, but simply have some pretty good fixtures, and I have rotation anyways with Hall and Castagna to make do in the meantime. So thank you guys so much for watching. That's my transfer plans. I'll see you guys and hope you guys enjoy the Sunday games.